Is the Boston housing market one of the strongest in America in 2025? And will home prices continue to go up across Boston, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and inner Massachusetts? As you can see, over the last year, prices in the Boston metro are up 5% year over year, while they're up 6% in Worcester, 6% in Manchester, and 7% in Providence. New England continues to be one of the most resilient housing markets in America that, despite 7% mortgage rates and an economic slowdown, is continuing to see prices go up. And the fundamental reason for this, everyone, is due to a shortage of inventory in homes for sale. For instance, you can see in the Boston metro, which is big, it goes all the way down to Plymouth and all the way up to Portsmouth, there's only 4,100 homes for sale. These inventory levels are half what they were before the pandemic, and they have not improved at all in the last 2 years. We're still trading at a very low level of supply across Boston. However, there's some interesting differences that are starting to show up by county. So let's zoom in and do some specific county level analysis. In Suffolk County, which is the main urban county in Boston, inventory is actually fairly normal, right around the long-term norm. You can see the big spike that occurred in the pandemic. Inventory has since come back down to a normal level, with home values up around 4.5% year over year in Suffolk County, up to a typical value of $720,000. There's lots of condos included in that. You can see values in Middlesex County are up 4.8%. Norfolk County are up 4.6%. Worcester County, which is a big county, values are up 5.8%. Up in Rockingham in New Hampshire, values are up 5.8%. And so we're just seeing really resilient home price growth all across Massachusetts, New England, Rhode Island, New Hampshire. Oh, by the way, in Providence, values are up 7.7% year over year. So we're just seeing really resilient home price growth all across New England. And I think this can be actually frustrating to some of you out there as a home buyer, because you go and look on Zillow or Realtor and you see houses in the Boston area that are really, really expensive. I have one friend, he's looking to buy a house right now, and he lives in Arlington, and he says he can't find anything less than $1 million. So he's looking out in Worcester now to buy a house because he doesn't, feel like it's affordable or worth it to buy in the Boston area, given how expensive the prices are. And I think this is something a lot of people in Boston are feeling and facing. So I want to show you something, everyone. I actually want to show you where I used to live when I lived in Boston. As some of you might know, I lived in Boston for 8 years and lived all around the city. I started in Somerville, and where I initially lived in Somerville was in East Somerville. And this was around like 10 years ago, before they did some of this development in Assembly Square. And you could see, if you want to buy, a townhouse or a multifamily in East Somerville, you're having to pay $950,000 for a 6-bed, 3-bath, 2,100 square feet. It was built in 1900. Now, actually, interestingly on this one, the owners cut the price. They initially had it at 1.3 million. Now it's down to 950, which is the lowest that the value estimate has been in 4 or 5 years for this property. When you look at it, it's very typical, actually, of what you would see around Boston. It's old, slightly charming. Oh, you can see the attic was redeveloped into a bedroom. That's like a big thing they do in Somerville. And so this would be the type of property that someone would buy, maybe if they wanted to live in it and rent out some of the bedrooms. It's still at a price point that's really difficult. What about this property here? It's another 6-bed, 3-bath, 1.15 million, built in 1890. Who knows what's going on inside this house? You can see the kitchen's actually not so bad. Interesting lighting in the bedroom. Another attic bedroom renovation. When I first lived in Boston, this is kind of actually the bedroom I first had when I lived in Somerville, my first year there. And so, these are price points that are still really difficult for people to handle. And, I think the unfortunate thing is that in the near term, it doesn't seem like there's going to be much price relief. So when we conduct our home price forecasts here at Reventure App, we look at the supply-demand dynamics in the market, and we rank every market in a score from 0 to 100 to tell us what's the likelihood that prices are going to go up or down in the future. And you can see our forecasts are up for pretty much all of these areas. I guess the lone exception is Suffolk County. We actually have, let's just call it a stable, slightly below average forecast for Suffolk County. So maybe we'll see some relief there. And maybe we'll actually see it in certain zip codes, like in Cambridge. We actually have some negative forecasts in Cambridge and in Alston due to a big spike in inventory. But if you head out to a lot of these suburbs, we have heavy upward price forecasts. So on this map, when you see blue on Reventure App, that means downward forecast. When you see red, that means upward forecast. And Massachusetts as a state is a 55 out of 100. The score goes from 0 to 100. So if you're at a 55, that's above average. Technically 55 is price is stable. You need to get to 56 to have an upward forecast. But you can see it's just there's no real improvement for buyers over the last 3 years. We went into a big seller's market during the pandemic. We came down from it slightly, but it's still a moderate seller's market in Massachusetts. It's still actually more of a seller's market in New Hampshire. New Hampshire is a 57 out of 100, everyone. On this forecast, prices in New Hampshire are still going up. There's no inventory in New Hampshire. I mean, take a look at this. There's only 2,000 homes on the market for sale in New Hampshire when prior to the pandemic there was 5,200. So as long as these inventory levels stay really low, we're not going to see price relief. We're going to have to see the inventory go up month over month, and it's just not happening yet. And some people start to ask me, well, Nick, what would need to happen to bring more inventory to the New England housing market to cause prices to start to go down in New England? And I think, the only real answer at this point is a recession. We would need a recession and we would need some economic distress to force the sellers in New England to sell at more reasonable prices, because they're not really facing the push or the pressure to sell at a reasonable price from any other source. There's very little building, very few home builders in New England. There's very few investors who speculate on the market. And so, for instance, like in Florida, where I am right now, we're seeing lots of investors sell at a loss. We're seeing builders liquidate homes and cut prices. And those are things that are pushing the market down. We don't have that in New England. There's just a big structural shortage of homes. On Reventure app, there's an interesting data point we have actually that I would encourage you to check out. It's called inventory as percentage of houses. So it's how many homes are listed for sale divided by the total owned housing stock. And in Massachusetts, there's 7,000 homes for sale on an owned housing stock of 1.8 million, meaning only 0.3% of all the houses are available for sale. Meanwhile, if you go to Florida, it's 2.2%. If you go to Texas, it's 1.4%. And this is largely due to the fact that there's just very few building permits. Very few building permits. In Florida, there's 190,000 building permits per year. In North Carolina, there's 95,000. In Massachusetts, there's only 14,000. Now, I really like Massachusetts, everyone. I really like Boston. As I said earlier, I lived there for 8 years. I lived there from 2011 to 2019. I worked actually on Boylston Street in the center of Back Bay in Boston for 8 years, and I lived all around. I lived in East Somerville, I lived in West Somerville, I lived in Allston, I lived in Brighton, I lived in Fenway, I lived in South End, and really enjoyed my time there. Boston's a very cosmopolitan city, very educated, good sports town, good restaurants, good mix of different things to do. And it actually is one of the strongest underlying economies in the US, right? Because it has a huge medical industry with massive hospitals. It has the most universities per capita of any area in America. Harvard, MIT, BU, BC, Suffolk, all those universities there. Has a big finance sector. It has a real estate sector. It has, of course, a massive tech sector as well. So it's a really diverse employment base. And, no matter really what happens in the economy, there's always going to be students going to those schools. There's always going to be doctors going to those colleges. And there's always going to be kind of a startup tech ecosystem to build new innovation and new ideas. So I'm kind of bullish on Boston in the long term. I do think maybe at some point, though, prices might have to correct a bit or just at least stop going up to allow incomes some time to catch up to where prices are today. And what I would encourage you guys to do, if you're a prospective buyer in Massachusetts or New Hampshire or Rhode Island, is head to www.reventure.app and start looking at the housing data in your area. In particular, type in your city and start looking at the different zip codes and how much values are going up or down over the last year. Look at how much inventory is going up or down in the last year. The inventory growth is actually one of the big things to pay attention to. That's a free data point. So some of these data points are free for you on Reventure app. But then what I would really recommend you do is look at our popular data, sign up for our premium plan so you can get our home price forecast. This is going to tell you how the market in your area is trending historically and into the future. This is a 12-month forward forecast ranked from 0 to 100. The more you are below 50, the more of a buyer's market it is. The more you are above 50, the more of a seller's market it is. And this, of course, will flow through to prices. The more of a seller's market your area is, the more likely the prices are to go up. The more a buyer's market it is, the more likely prices are to go down. We have these forecasts available for every zip code in the Boston metro and actually every zip code across New England. So head to www.reventure.app and sign up for a premium plan right now to access that data. It's going to really help you as a home buyer or investor in 2025 better understand the market and better predict the future trends.